Hello, family, and welcome to another episode of Role Model Makers Experts Cafe. I'm your host, Dr. L, the Parent Whisperer, and today with me I have an amazing lady. The topic is actually very important and actually goes well beyond family. So I want you to tune in, put it on your radar, be able to identify this, whether it's in you or those around you. It's very, very important. I want to introduce to you guys an amazing lady that is part of our community. Her name is Adey Jones or Adey Jones. Did I say that correctly?
Yes,
Almost correct.
both are good enough.
Awesome, awesome. All right, Del, I'm really happy that you've taken time out of your busy day to be here and explain a little bit more about what you do. And audience members, thank you for tuning in. This is a really important topic. Del, can you tell us what you do and why you do what you do? And we'll go from there.
Absolutely. What I do is I am a relationship mastery coach, but I specialize in the areas of codependency and narcissistic abuse. And the reason I do this is because I spent the first 50 years, almost 50 years of my life, struggling in my relationships. I suffered debilitating codependency, and I kept finding myself in narcissistic relationships. And I often say that the last one almost killed me. I mean, not physically, but emotionally, I would say, like, I felt like a rag doll with all the stuffing pulled out
Mhm.
after that particular relationship. And I just know how debilitating it can be. It often originates in childhood. So and certainly mine did. I developed codependency and that attraction for narcissists. And so I just know how painful that journey is. And if I can help anybody see something differently, like I did, and show up in the world differently and attract different relationships, healthy, loving relationships that we all deserve. So.
So you actually mentioned something that's really important because usually when we're talking about abusive relationships or relationships where one person is not being kind to the other person, most people think about the physical aspect, but oftentimes it's not the physical that stays with us long after we are out of that relationship. It's the mental and the emotional residues from that relationship. So this is really important. And
Yeah.
many of us, we are subject to this without even knowing it. And more importantly, our children are picking up on this and they're also either incorporating it in themselves or being subject to it. So it's important for us to understand what this is, how it impacts us, and be able to identify that. So can you tell a little bit more about the challenges that the recipients as well as the people who are in that kind of a personality um, should notice and be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying, and it absolutely is. I mean, if we've been raised in a narcissistic environment, we don't feel like we have our own identity. Our narcissistic parent sees us as extensions of them. They need to reflect well on them. They don't have their own, as I say, sense of self or who they want to be in the world. It's all about catering and pleasing this one parent who tends to be very overbearing, dominating, bullying, dismissive. I mean, all of those things that can really emotionally damage a child. And that was certainly in my situation. I was so fearful of, I grew up without a father. I just had a mother. So I think I had two narcissists
Mhm.
that didn't live together.
Right.
So I never met my father, even though he only lived a couple of miles down the road. But I grew up feeling I have to make my only parent, my mother, happy. So it was all about people pleasing, learning to settle for crumbs, all the sort of dynamics that codependency, and that fear of abandonment, well, okay, my father abandoned me, and if I upset my mother, she'll abandon me and I'm going to be all alone. That's how we grow up feeling. So as codependents grow up, they have very low self-esteem. As I say, they settle for crumbs in their relationship. They have a very low sense of entitlement, which makes them, perfect for a narcissist who has elevated entitlement, and it's all about them. So it makes the perfect match. They're like, they'll bypass the healthy people and go, oh, this is my victim. She has low
Mhm.
self-esteem. She's going to be dependent on me. She's going to fear being abandoned. I say she because I'm talking about myself. It can obviously go both ways. so those are some of the qualities of codependency, that always putting other people's needs ahead of your own, sometimes being even attracted to people that are either have a dependency on an addiction or something like that. Because often, well, we feel that we're broken and they're broken, so we're a good match. And the other thing is, if they need us, then that we feel a little more secure in the relationship. They're not going to leave me because they need me. And these are all sort of, as I say, coping mechanisms we've learned from a child, but they're not helping us function well as adults in adult relationships. It's basically like your 3-year-old is showing up in your relationships, with that sort of. And it doesn't always manifest as neediness and looking like needy. Sometimes we can be so ashamed of our neediness and our dependency that we become hyper independent. So we are needless and wantless, because we don't want to drive the other person away. So it can really damage how you show up, not just in your relationships, but in your life. Like you said, that sort of at work. If, a lot of my clients have, maybe a narcissistic partner, or maybe they have a narcissistic parent, or they have a narcissistic boss or co-workers. And how do you learn to exist within those relationships with the least amount of damage to you? That's the codependent. And the narcissist is, I just say, I don't have a lot of these sites you'll see, it's like the narc and there's anger. And when I left my relationship, I wanted to feel neutral. I didn't want to be in love with the person anymore. I didn't want to be in hate. I just wanted to be neutral. And that's because if you're in love or in hate, you're still entangled. And I just wanted that neutrality, especially if you share children together. You have to sort of manage that, and how you co-parent, which can be very challenging if your ex is a narcissist. And also, I have compassion. I see that their way of thinking and behaving comes out of fear. And, if you weren't a fearful person, you wouldn't want to dominate, control, bully, lie, manipulate another human being. You would be just much more confident, and you'd be okay sort of in relationships. So I have compassion for people that suffer from narcissism, but it doesn't mean I want to be in a relationship with them. And it doesn't mean I'm going to tolerate abuse, but I don't have hatred. I see them as incredibly limited when it comes to having healthy relationships.
That's an amazing story, Del, and you actually have defined it pretty well. I had actually 2 questions came up for me. The first one, being in mental health and working with autism spectrum children, I understand that a lot of things in this field is like there's no black and white, it's gray. So at what point is it normal, and at what point does it become abnormal? If there's a definition or someplace that you can put your finger in, like that is like passing that line, basically, if you have an answer for that. And then let's address that first.
Well, for me, anytime there's any type of abuse, I think is crossing the line. Now, certainly we all know, like you said, physical abuse, we know what that feels like. There were so many times in my 18-year relationship where I wish I had a bruise to show the mental pain I was in. It was like, it didn't, and people don't realize how much emotional and psychological pain you're in if you don't have that bruise. I was watching a documentary afterwards, and it was about this woman who had, once I'd left my relationship, who'd been physically abused. And I was listening to her, and I kept thinking, oh my God, this is me. But I just didn't have the punch mark or the black eye to show it, but how I felt. And, the psychological abuse that, like you said, when people, I came out of my relationship, not even not trusting other people. The worst thing was I didn't trust myself. I was like, you keep getting yourself in these, you're not trustworthy. You're putting me in dangerous situations. So that was huge for me, was to own that I had been abused, because I had that codependent love. So I had that addictive love where I was hanging in there, you know, and we all know with narcissists that it's like on the pedestal, off the pedestal, that intermittent reinforcement of love bombing you, then degrading you and love bombing you. And you're just in that loop of wanting that love bombing again, that feeling you got from them. But it was, as I say, it was codependent love. It wasn't real love. I didn't have what I consider real love is the love that you have for yourself. And that to me really comes from a combination of spirituality and psychology. That's what I teach from. I love psychology, and I was in therapy for many, many years, and it helped me a lot. But it really is for me the combination of spirituality and psychology, and the way that dovetails together, that you can overcome these habits that you've engaged in all your life. And as you said earlier, you don't often even see them, you don't recognize them. But when they're pointed out to you, and then you're shown the way out of it, that's where the magic is. So
we're going to get to the magic in just a second. And I'm sure for you, there was a moment, there was a point where there was a switch that turned on or turned off, whatever it is. But then from that point on, the magic started happening. So what was that switch for you?
Oh, wow. That's a story. It was 15 years ago on Valentine's Day. I was sitting on the edge of a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and I would do my daily meditation there. And I heard a voice from very deep inside. It almost felt like it was outside of me, actually. It was not the voice in my head. And it said, "Get out now before he kills you."
Wow.
And followed quickly by, "You need to learn to love yourself more than you love him." Now, as I said, I wasn't in physical danger, but when I had met my partner 18 years earlier, I had been a successful costume designer in Hollywood. I looked like it had it all together on the outside. Obviously, I was suffering on the inside. I was not healthy when it came to my relationships. But, you know, 18 years later, I was just a shell of the woman I'd been, as I said, just, you know, just in tatters. Any confidence I'd had was in tatters. So I basically a year earlier, I'd found out some unbelievable truths about my marriage that I knew it's a very challenging one, but I didn't know that it was the level of deception was as great as it was, put it that way. So I came back home and I said, I want a divorce. And that was the turning point. And right at that time, I came across a spiritual understanding that, and I had studied spirituality and psychology for years. I had a master's in spiritual psychology. I had been on a spiritual path and self-help, all of this stuff, trying to fix myself from when I was 21, when I first arrived in America. And but there was something about this book that I read and this understanding that it was pointing to, that was telling me there was nothing wrong with me on the inside. Nothing was broken, nothing was damaged. Anything that had happened to me as a child hadn't tainted me, hadn't, you know, it definitely bruised me, pushed up against me, but it didn't get to the core of who I am, that spiritual essence of who I am.
Right.
So with that, I took 18 months off because I realized I was still attracted to narcissists. And I was like, no, this is my last one. I do not need to keep doing this. Mm-hmm. So I took that 18 months off and I immersed myself in just really getting to know myself. And that was the biggest gift I could have ever given myself. I realized how, you know, I used to want people to complete me. That's part of, I felt my low self-esteem was so low. It's like, oh, these strong, confident, powerful people will complete me because I'm not strong and powerful. And that's what I believed. But when I spent that 18 months alone, I realized how resourceful I was, how strong I was, what a great parent I was. I mean, just all these things I learned about myself. And so ironically, when I was with my ex, who, when I had low self-esteem, or rather, you know, didn't, hang on one second, what was I going to say? When I felt second best, he treated me like I was second best. Mm. When I didn't respect myself, he didn't respect me because I stayed in an abusive relationship. That's not respecting yourself. There were just many things that he was reflecting back to me. but once I learned really who I was at my essence, not who I needed to become. I used to always think I have to become something or get another certificate to be worthy or whatever it was, to prove myself or to become more confident. But when I really settled into the truth of my spiritual nature, which is the majority of me, there is no comparison. There, we're all equal on that level. I didn't need to prove anything to anybody. And so that was the turning point. And I have to say, since then, I have been in the most wonderful, beautiful relationship for 13 years with a man that loves and respects me and cherishes me, because I love and respect and cherish myself. So that's pretty much what my turning point was.
Well, thank you for your courage and you sharing your vulnerability with us. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure that the audience members are having goosebumps just like I did. So, all right. So obviously really important when we talk about families, or actually connecting in general. This is something that is essential for us as human beings and as social creatures to master this. What are the typical challenges that you see when people come to you and they are complaining? What are the type of complaints? What kind of challenges they're facing? And naturally, if you want things to be different, you have to also change, right? So what are the challenges in their change as well?
Well, they usually come to me, as I said, for many different reasons. Usually it's they're in a current narcissistic relationship and they feel addicted to their partner and they can't leave. So that's a huge part. It's an addictive quality to the love they think they have, and also that dependency. So they come to me with that, or they're recovering from a past relationship that may have ended 5-10 years ago and they cannot get over. They're still in that state of how could they, what happened to me? It's really, it can really leave long lasting effects where people swear off ever being in a relationship again. So I really help people, my heart is wide open because I know how strong I am now. So I'm not afraid of loving. I'm not afraid of getting hurt, because I know that I've already been through hell and I got through it. So why live a life when you're holding back? The other one is, often people come to me when they grew up in a narcissistic environment, they got away, but now their parent is aging and they're like, oh God, they need me now. I don't want to go back in there. I escaped. I moved across the world like me. Something like that. Sometimes they so it's usually parents, partners, or a sibling, or as said, as a boss. I mean, I teach people how to, if they want to maintain somewhat of a relation, or, an ex-husband and you share children, you have to maintain a relationship with them. And I teach them tools on how to, like I said, exist, limit the time together. But while you are there, not to take things personally. And this comes from the spiritual understanding that I share, how to not take things so personally. Let me use my little snow globe here. This is what I use to demonstrate. That's got a little Buddha in the center. That's all of us. That's our spiritual essence that exists within all of us. Never gets disconnected. It's never gone anywhere. But what happens is we all live in these little, what I call separate realities, little thought bubbles, where we are seeing the world from our perspective. And so what I help people see is, people that are narcissists are just living in this little thought created world, just as all of us are, that's telling them that it's a fearful world. They need to dominate and control and whatever. So they're doing things based on their thinking, and it really has nothing to do with you. So we don't need to take it personally. They're just in this survival bubble. So, but I teach people to have healthy boundaries, don't point out to the narcissist they're a narcissist unless you want your head bitten off. I mean, there's no point, they'll never see it. They don't change. The only thing that can change the dynamic of the relationship is how you change yourself, in the sense of how you show up. As I said, not taking it personally, not trying to control their experience and try and calm them down or engage. Just calmly stand over here, let them say their piece. They will calm down on their own. And you just know that if they're saying things that are abusive, then you just very quietly leave. You're busy. You don't tolerate it, but you don't lecture, because that's not going to help. We know that. We've tried for years and it doesn't work. We can't change other people. We can only
Del,
change.
you're sharing a lot of tips, and actually the imagery was really clear and profound as well. What would be the one tip that you would have for our audience members that after listening to this, that would be the actionable item that they would need to do, or they should do?
I really honestly, it all comes down to the relationship that you have with yourself. When you have a strong, healthy relationship with yourself. And I always say, you know, we hear this, like, you've got to learn to love yourself. Look in the mirror, love yourself. It's like we're a separate being out there that we need to learn to love, that's damaged and broken and all of this stuff. And I always say that we are made of love. I mean, our spiritual essence is love. We are made of love. We don't have to learn to love ourselves. What we need to do is learn to not listen to the chatter in our head. And you see, that's programming from very early on. We've either, you know, like in my case with my father, he never said to me, you're not worthy of being loved. You're too fat, you're too stupid, you're too whatever. But I made up a story in my head that if I had been, you know, good enough or prettier or funnier or cleverer or all these things that he would have wanted to own me as his child and acknowledge me and love me. And I carried that belief system. I would say, as much as I'd done all the work I'd done, there was still the undercurrent of thoughts that I wasn't good enough, that all these thoughts. And I spent years trying to control those thoughts, change them. And what I realized is I just need to change my relationship to that thinking, not the thoughts. They're going to come through anyway. But I stopped trying to change them. I stopped trying to work on myself. I stopped trying to stop those thoughts. And I just saw them as energy moving through me. And the less attention you pay them, the quicker they move on. And then they're just up for grabs for anybody. I used to think my thoughts were telling me who I was. It was like, oh, they're telling you you're stupid, so you don't get too big for your boots. You know, you know who you are. It was my ego trying to protect me. Stay down.
So what's the best way to love yourself for you, maybe?
Is to know that we are made of love, to know that we are 99% spiritual and 1% human, all rolled into one. And on the spiritual level, we're all 100% equal. I know that little expression, this little earth suit, we come down to earth and down, is all a little different. Brown haired, blue eyed, whatever, all different. Some have higher IQs, some have higher EQs, but we're all a little different, but that's 1% of us. And when we focus and live from that 1%, we live in fear, we live in comparison, we live in, you know, past and, or rather future and past, and all this stuff is going on in our heads. But when we can just relax knowing that, God, 99% of me is okay, more than okay, that I have this incredible innate wisdom inside me that's guiding me and telling me, rather than this fearful thinking that's trying to control our lives, that wisdom is a beautiful inner guide. It's always got our back. And knowing that we are made of love, so we don't have to learn to love ourselves. We already are love. And to just take it lightly. Whatever thoughts pop in your head, you don't have to believe them.
So audience members, I want you to take a moment. If you have a mirror or if you're looking at a camera like a phone, just kind of look at yourself, look at your eyes, the windows to your soul, and do what Del just said, and maybe even say it out loud and see if it resonates with you. Or do you have hesitation and resistance to it? Do you just brush it off that you say it, but you don't mean it about yourself and loving yourself, that you are made of love and you're a spiritual creature that has that in you and you're built of it? And if you find that hard, then that might be time actually to have a conversation with Del, because that is the essence and the foundations of how we build relationships and how we connect to the world. So thank you, Del, for that. How can people find out more about you? Speaking of connecting with Del.
You can go to I put the links in the chat. You can go to my website. You can see all my offerings on my website. I also have a YouTube channel with a lot of the videos I've done. I've done, I've just launched my new podcast, which is called Relationship Mastery. Prior to that, I did about 150 interviews with some spiritual teachers from around the world that talk about this understanding that I teach from. And it's just, it's completely changed my life. I mean, from somebody that was fearful, I embrace life. I'm not afraid of failing. I can just bounce back. All my relationships have improved, certainly with my ex-husband and my two beautiful sons. So, and everyone, quite honestly.
So guys, especially for those of you who are these busy multitaskers, you might not be watching. I'm going to put all the information, the content that Del has generously provided in the description of this video. So be sure to go ahead and check it out. And also role model the behavior that this world is not a dark, big, bad world, that there are people that actually want to support you. They have, and they generally are interested in making the world a better place. And it is important for us as human beings to connect and role model that behavior for our children, so that they understand that they don't have to do all the heavy lifting by themselves, or that they don't have to have all the answers. So make sure that you connect with Del. And speaking of connections, if you haven't already done so, connect with us by clicking subscribe, so that you can get notifications of all the experts that come here sharing their gifts and passions and their expertise with you guys, such as Del, and make sure that you benefit from those. Del, before we finish, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be here. Any final words for our audience members?
Yeah, again, it's the same thing as before. It's the most important relationship in the world is the one you have with yourself. And when that is, you know, in a healthy state, then all of the relationships you have improve, and the people that come into your life will reflect that back to you.
Fantastic. Awesomely said. All right, guys, keep connecting, and Del, we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Lovely.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.